Have you ever really looked at the polo shirt in your closet? I mean, really looked at it? It seems so simple, right? Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain and uncover this whole hidden world of calculations, formulas, and some seriously precise math that turns a bunch of thread and fabric into the shirt you wear. Let's get into it. So let me just ask you this straight up. How much fabric do you think you'd need to make one of these? A yard? Maybe a meter or two? You might just eyeball it, right? But the real answer? Well, it's a lot more calculated than you might think. Yeah, in the world of mass manufacturing, where they're making thousands of these things at a time, guessing just isn't a word they use. The amount of fabric they need is calculated with incredible precision. We're talking right down to the gram. This isn't just about sewing. This is industrial scale mathematics. To even begin to understand the math, we've got to look at the shirt's blueprint first. So in this first section, we're going to deconstruct the polo, break it down into its core pieces, and see exactly how it all fits together. You see, a polo shirt isn't just one single piece of fabric. No way. It's an assembly of very distinct parts. You've got the main body and the sleeves, of course. Then there's the collar, the cuffs, and sometimes you'll find other little pieces like a pocket or that half-moon piece of fabric on the back. And every single one of these components needs its own precise calculation. All right, now for the main event. In Section 2, we are getting into the nitty-gritty, the actual numbers, to see exactly how a manufacturer figures out the fabric needed for a massive order of, let's say, 10,000 shirts. The key to this whole operation, the one number that rules them all, is something called GSM. It stands for grams per square meter. Think of it as the fabric's weight and density. Having a specific GSM is how they make sure that every single shirt out of thousands has the exact same feel and quality. Now, before we can even use that GSM number, we need the shirt's measurements. But look closely at this slide. There's a crucial detail here. They don't just use the final length. They add what's called an allowance, a few extra centimeters for all the seams and hems. This makes sure there's enough material to actually sew the pieces together. In this business, precision is everything. So it really all boils down to a pretty simple three-step process. First, you take those precise measurements, including the allowances. Second, you factor in the fabric's weight using its GSM. And finally, you calculate the total weight of fabric needed, which they usually do on a per dozen basis. And here it is, the engine that drives that whole process. Now, I know this formula might look a little intimidating, but trust me, all it's doing is turning those steps we just talked about into math. It takes the area of the fabric pieces, multiplies it by the fabric's GSM, and then by 12 to get the total weight for a dozen shirts. That huge number at the end, that's just to convert everything neatly into kilograms. So when you plug all the numbers from our example into that formula, you get this, 2.48 kilograms. That is the exact weight of fabric needed for the main body and sleeves of 12 polo shirts. We're not measuring in yards or meters anymore, we're measuring in kilos. Okay, so let's scale that up for the entire 10,000 shirt order. For that, the factory has to order over 2,300 kilograms of the main fabric, plus another 177 kilos for the collars and cuffs. Put that all together, and that's more than the weight of a car, just in fabric. But hold on, the final cost of a shirt isn't just the fabric, not by a long shot. The factory itself has bills to pay. So in Section 3, we're going to dive into how manufacturers calculate the price of their own labor, their time, and all their resources into every single shirt. They figure this out using a metric called the cost of making, or CM for short. The easiest way to think about it is like the factory's monthly operating budget, just broken down to figure out exactly how much it costs to produce one single thing. So, what's actually included in that CM cost? Well, pretty much everything you can think of. It's the factory's rent, the electricity and water bills, transportation, and, this is a big one, the wages for every single worker and staff member. It's a complete top-to-bottom look at the cost of doing business. The logic behind it is actually pretty straightforward. You just take the factory's total monthly expenses, everything we just talked about, and you divide that by its total production output for that month. What you're left with is the base cost to make one single item. In practice, here's what it looks like. For the example factory in our source material, the cost of making for 1 dozen basic t-shirts is $3.08. And remember, that's just the price for the factory's labor and overhead. It's totally separate from the cost of the fabric itself. So the shirts are made. Awesome. But now they have to get from the factory floor to a store near you. In our next section, we're going to look at the math that governs the world of logistics and shipping. And when you're talking shipping, there's a new three-letter acronym you need to know: CBM. It stands for cubic meter. See, we're not talking about weight anymore. This is all about volume. Shipping companies use CBM to figure out exactly how much space an order will take up in a container, and that's ultimately what determines the cost. The CBM is calculated by multiplying the length, width, and height of a single shipping carton. So for one standard box of shirts, that comes out to this tiny fraction of a cubic meter, 0.032. But remember, we're not dealing with one little box. We're dealing with a massive order of 5,000 cartons. When you multiply that out, the total volume is over 162 cubic meters. That is a huge amount of space, and it all has to be calculated perfectly to book the right shipping container. So how does all this money and all these goods move safely across the globe? It's done with these really cool financial tools called letters of credit. First, the buyer's bank issues a master letter of credit, which is basically a promise to the manufacturer that they'll get paid. Then, the manufacturer takes that guarantee to their bank, which issues a back-to-back letter of credit to pay the fabric suppliers. It's like a secure financial chain that makes the whole world of global trade actually possible. Okay, let's bring it all home in our final section. As we've seen, the entire process, from a single thread all the way to a massive shipping container, is completely governed by these hidden numbers. And believe it or not, we've barely even scratched the surface. There are meticulous calculations for everything. The button size, it's measured in a special unit called leanie. They calculate precise percentages for fabric wastage. They even calculate the cost of the cardboard shipping box itself. Absolutely nothing is left to chance. So the real takeaway here is this. Every price tag shows a cost, right? But now you know that behind that cost is a whole world of hidden formulas for the fabric, for the labor, for the shipping, and for everything in between. So the next time you pick up a piece of clothing, what do you